Welcome. It's so good to be with you on this Wednesday as we get together for a little midweek Bible study and devotional time. And I'm so glad you've taken some time out of your day to join us to do just that, to dig into God's Word and hopefully be uplifted and encouraged and a little bit enlightened and challenged by what He has to say to us and what He calls us to. And again, I'm so glad that you've taken some time out to join us today to do just that. You know, we've been in a series on Sunday mornings, and I hope you'll come join us if you haven't already, or you can always check them out online as well on our YouTube page. But we've been in a series called Faith and Doubt. And over the last couple of weeks in this series, we've kind of talked about some of the more common questions that come up when it comes to these issues of faith and doubt, and maybe some of the struggles that non-believers have as they look at our world and look at some of the things that happen in our world, and even believers like us as well have when it comes to just what we see around us. And one of the things that we talked about this past Sunday, a couple days ago, is pain. And how do we look at pain and suffering in the world that we live in and that we experience those things. And as much as we would like for it, there's a lot that can be said, but as much as we would like for it to not be the case, pain is an important, albeit unwelcome, element of reality in this world that we live in. And again, there's a lot that can be said, but I do want to at least hone in on this aspect of it, because not only is pain often helpful, but in many ways it's absolutely necessary to human health and well-being. I mean, how do you keep your hands away from an open flame other than to know that it hurts? How do you know to flush grains of sand out of your eyes or things that are harmful to your eyes? Any physician will tell you that a person whose nerves can't send pain signals will have serious problems in living a normal life, and they can actually do irrevocable damage to different parts of their body that may not feel or experience pain. That's our body's way of telling us something's wrong or something's out of whack. And yet, in light of that, there is a serious error that is often done in many churches and Bible studies and Bible study materials and personal belief systems, when the naive claim is made that somehow true faith delivers people from suffering. And so pain and suffering, yes, are part of our world, but if I just have enough faith, then I won't experience that pain and suffering. Really? Then I wonder, as I read through the Bible, stories like, why didn't it keep innocent Naboth, if you read about in the Old Testament, from being stoned to death when wicked King Ahab and his wife Queen Jezebel decided to seize his land? Or why didn't it prevent a guy like Stephen, one of the early Christian martyrs, who was professing and bearing witness to Jesus and yet was murdered because of his faith and his testimony? Or look at our world today. Why doesn't it stop innocent lives from being taken? Or why are babies born with defects, or innocent children become victims of predators? Why doesn't it stop those things? And those are those issues make us ask a lot of different questions. And I can't answer all of those. And even on Sundays, we talked about those things. My attempt is not to answer all of them, but just to at least get the conversation started and maybe have us think differently about how we think about pain and suffering. And as I ask those questions, though, back to those questions I just asked, understand that while God allows suffering, that doesn't mean He's the one who causes it or sends it into our lives. We experience pain because we live in physical bodies in a contingent world that is broken and fallen. We suffer emotional pain because we are sensitive to misfortune and loss and injustice in this same broken and fallen world. And perhaps the most horrible wounds that come to our lives and to our spirits are honestly traceable back to our own choices and our own decisions, and sometimes our own rebelling against God and rebelling against the things that He wants us to do and the life He wants us to live, and instead we choose to do not so good things to ourselves and to each other. But understand this as well. Faith is not a vaccine against those things. If it were, then everyone would just be a Christian for the worst possible reason, right? Just to say, well, that way I don't have to deal with all this stuff, and I can get out of pain and suffering free card. It would indulge our selfishness. It would exempt us from the tough things that those other people have to face in this life. More correctly, though, faith is a relationship with God that provides the daily presence and strength and encouragement of the living Christ for whatever comes our way. It's not a vaccine against those things, but rather it gives His presence and His hope and His encouragement in the midst of those things. It doesn't exempt us, but rather it does help to sustain us. Now, having said that, let me also say that I believe God still works miracles, and He can and still works in our lives. I believe that He delivers people still from pain and suffering by His clear and direct intervention. I believe those things still happen, but miracles are, by definition, rare and out of the ordinary. So I'm always at least a little bit suspicious of a person who offers to make the uncommon and infrequent into on-demand events. Again, God can do it. But I think we sometimes need to be careful with our proclamations about it certainly happening. Surely the answer that Paul was given, the Apostle Paul was given, is the more typical reply in the midst of our pain and our suffering when Jesus said to him in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, "My grace is sufficient for you. For my power," Jesus says, "is made perfect in weakness." Instant solutions and easy answers, those aren't God's promises to us. His pledge to us, however, is that we will never be unloved and alone. As the Hebrew writer says of God in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5, "Never will I leave you." God says this to us, "Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you." And so while in no way am I trying to minimize the pain and the suffering that you've been through, or maybe that you're going through right now, instead of allowing it to be a barrier, pray that God will use it as a bridge. Never feel obligated to deny its reality or its damage or the hurt that it has caused, the pain that you feel, but trust God to provide sufficient grace for each day and to provide His loving goodness and presence every day, no matter what it is that you may be facing. Hope you have a blessed day. God bless.